With a series as large as Monster Hunter, there are bound to be monsters that stand the test of time and those that don't. No matter what, you are bound to have some stinkers when making a franchise this large. But recently, never have I seen such widely regarded viewpoints, not since the likes of Plesioth, but with the end boss of World's Low Rank, Zorah Magdaros. What started out as hype and sheer awe of the monster turned into such low boredom and tedium that many people regard it as the worst fight in the game. But why exactly is that? Why do many people find it so boring, so underwhelming that it is worse than Kieran? Are many of these statements over-exaggerated, or are they perfectly just and exact in their reasoning? That, my dear recruits, is what I am here to find out. Today, I'm going to be looking at not just the fight, but the premise, concept, and execution of this Godzilla wannabe, to figure out what, if anything, did go wrong and how so. Without further ado, let us begin.
Where's my Dragonator?
Rather than just go on the offensive and head straight to the argument on why many think it sucks, I think we need to take a step back and understand what it does right. Yes, you heard that correctly, what it does right. Because for as much as people like to point out the bad, and I know that there are people who are watching this video just to see me pick out the bad, there is also a time and place to appreciate the good. In order to understand the full scope of Zorah and the argument, we need to take a look at the good. So, what does Zorah do right? Well, for starters, a sense of scope and size. In a way, Zorah feels like a creature straight out of Shadow of the Colossus, and not just because of his size, but because of the ability to traverse him, kind of like phalanx to a degree. He is so large that he becomes his own level, forcing hunters to walk around on his shell, all the while trying to cling on and climb whenever he stands up. You just feel so puny compared to this embodiment of nature. Never before in this series have I felt so small, so insignificant when with the likes of Cedeus and Dalmadur. But even those two pale in comparison to this monster. Zorah isn't just huge, he is colossal in size, easily being the largest monster in the entire series at almost 258 meters, easily outclassing the likes of Cedeus, Dire Morales, and a standing Lao. Sure, Raviant and Dala are larger, but that's only in length. Zorah is massive both in terms of height and just overall being extra thick! And this scale helps add in nicely to where you fight it. Granted, the Everstream is a cool area to fight it in, but the canyon is where you truly get a sense of scale. Look at his claw and head when he slams down! You don't even compare to its finger! So, besides the size and scope, what else does Zorah do right? Well, in terms of a theme, it is one of the better ones when you first encounter him. The theme starts out slow and ominous, and fits perfectly with the cutscene as you fight him. It is almost daybreak. Your scout flies turn blue, and head down to the bottom of the ravine, as you see the back of a gigantic monster slowly rise out. And as night turns to day, the theme blares to life with the instruments, signifying the monster's awakening and roar. And as you head to your post to halt the beast's progress, the theme roars with a loud, triumphant, but ever still ominous march as you prepare for a battle for the history books. The theme is slow and ominous, always getting across to the listener the slow marching of Zorah and the power that is hidden behind him. But when the instruments echo into a barrage of cannons, it illustrates the hunter and everyone here doing everything they can to stop the beast and capture it, which makes it ultimately more impactful that you don't actually stop it the first time around, and don't even kill it in the final encounter. Well, at least right then and there. There's also the story behind Zorah and its involvement in the plot, where your main goal is to figure out why Zorah is here and where he is going. Later on, it is eventually discovered why he is here and the danger he poses to the new world if he doesn't die in his rightful place. This is all, of course, thanks to the pheromones used by Xeno'jiva, and while it isn't Shakespeare levels of storytelling or even the best in the franchise, it's still a reason for you to care about what is happening. At least, somewhat. But with all that out of the way, let's get to what you all are here for. The negatives. Unfortunately, for how much I praise Zorah for its size and scope, this factor also severely harms the capabilities of the fight and what it could do. When fighting such a large creature as this, you're not going to be able to do much with that dinky little sword you have there. Unless you create an area where the monster can switch positions and have places to climb onto, like Dala, you're going to have to do something else. So understandably, Capcom decides to create the siege battles. Instead of trying to tackle the monster head-on for the entire fight, you pelt the monster with cannons, ballista, and the almighty dragon. Now, in concept, this is actually reasonable and makes sense. But where it falls apart is in execution. Just here. Take a look at what you do during the first encounter. And here's the second encounter. Yep. That's the fight for a good while. Just running around, picking up ammo and cannons, and firing them at Zorah. All the while, Zorah just slowly,
Very slowly
approaches the barrier and... Is this monster even trying? It deals so little damage to the barrier when it does attack, and it does it so slowly that it's basically impossible to fail at this section. Well, I mean, unless you're these guys.
This is the last cannon.
That is the first time in Monster Hunter history that goddamn tower has went down.
At this point of the fight, any dramatic tension, fear you might have had from the size and scope of this monster, just falls completely flat on its face. Size means nothing if there isn't some stake to the monster, something to fear, something that convinces you of its power and what it could do. It would be like if in Godzilla 2, they made Godzilla the star of the movie, gave him some more screen time, but you never had him fight or use his powers, just basically lightly tapping Ghidorah as an attack. You are the king of the monsters! For Kulu's sake, do something! But now I know, someone is going to say,
"Oh, but her story says otherwise. It's gonna blow up the new world if we don't do something."
Okay. So, there's all this build-up and telling of power, but we don't see it. We don't get an example of it. The only thing that hurts real bad somewhat during this entire fight is when the magma cores all become active. That only happens once. The fireball, perhaps? But that's pretty easy to avoid, to be honest. Not even being slammed down by a 257 meter tall monster with its hand hurts all that much. So, unless if you just don't watch your health, get killed by the magma cores being active, or just utterly fail at protecting the barrier, which, as iterated before, is basically impossible, then you literally have no way of dying. But it's not the difficulty or lack thereof that irks me. Nah, fam, that's not the big problem here. Lack of difficulty doesn't equate automatically to it being the worst thing ever. No, the biggest sin of this battle is that it is so freaking boring! How? How do you make a battle against a monster this big and massive, something that should be a spectacle and something to look forward to, boring? The worst offender of this whole battle is the second stage during the first encounter and the first phase in the second encounter. You see, the objective during this stage of the battle is to weaken Zorah by targeting the 4 magma cores scattered throughout his shell. But during the battle, Zorah switches from being on all fours to being up on his hind legs, meaning that some magma cores become inaccessible and vice versa, and that scaling the beast now involves climbing and a lot of time. So, okay. Destroy all 4 of the magma cores and move on to the second stage immediately afterwards, right? If only it were that simple. You kill the 3 magma cores you can hit at the moment, Nerd comes by for no reason other than to say,
"Oh hey guys, I'm the flagship and am important."
leaves after a short while, and then you try to reach the 4th magma core, locate on his head, only to not reach it in the time because he decides to go back on all fours, and then you wait for the rest of the first phase to end and wait till the commander's a-million-year monologue is over, and then finally move on to the second phase. This becomes even more pathetic when you remember where the locations of the magma cores are, meaning you can mow them down in record time and you either have to wait or mine some ore until Nergigante appears. Oh, and speaking of Nergigante, guess what? You don't even need to fight him! Yep, that's right. If you do jack crap and just wait, he will eventually leave automatically, meaning that even though the NPCs say you have to confront it, even though in the cutscene beforehand, the commander literally says,
"One more thing. Nergigante is bound to show up to try to make a mess of this. If it gets in our way, it's up to you to stop it. This whole operation rides on how well you do that. We can do this."
you can just do nothing, and he will leave. This, ladies and gentlemen, is more than just a failure of the battle and combat, but a failure of storytelling. There is such a large disconnect between what the game and NPCs say and what the player actually does that you can pilot a flying airship through the ravine and still have room for several more. And guess what happens next? Some climbing, not reaching the 4th magma core, most likely, Zorah going back on all fours, and more waiting! Combine this absolutely boring phase with a trivial, repetitive, and overall unfulfilling battle of the other, and you have what many consider the worst battle in the whole game. Hell, not even landing the Dragonator and having proof of a hero play in the background feels all that satisfying. I don't know if it's just me, but the Dragonator doesn't have that same oomph that the previous games have had, where you just feel as if you did a massive blow against a monster and are now turning the tides in your favor. It just doesn't feel the same. And combined with the fact that we don't even get a facial shot of him reeling back in pain, and instead just his feet slightly going back, unless you have somebody else down there pulling the Dragonator so you can see eye level with him, and the fact that this proof of a hero rendition is so slow that by the time when it gets to the good parts, you know, when you feel like a hero can do anything, that the battle is basically over. So, with all that wrapped up, let's conclude this video.
It's over. Yes.
In all honesty, before the game actually came out, I was really looking forward to this monster. I wanted to see how exactly they would make you fight such a colossal monster, and if they could change some of the more boring aspects of previous siege fights. But here we are, and I just have to say, yada yada. When I first fought this guy in the story mode, I didn't get what all the complaints were about. I didn't understand why some would consider it the worst fight in the whole game, when you had the horror show that was Kieran and tempered and arch-tempered later down the line. Even now as I'm writing the script, I wouldn't say I hated this monster. Is it the absolute worst thing I've ever fought? Hell no. There were far bigger and worse fish, not just in the monster series, but throughout my experience of playing games. But after taking a step back from the initial 2 fights of it, and looking at the actual battle from a technical and story perspective, I can say I understand where a lot of people come from, and can certainly agree. If I were to sum up Zorah in one sentence, it would be wasted potential. You have all these things going for the monster: its story relevance, its size and power, the threat it poses if you ultimately don't stop it, and the way you could have fought it. If Capcom truly made this battle entertaining and tapped into the potential, we could have had the new God Mazios. Yes, it's a stretch, I know, a massive one at that, but I'm trying to get the point across that this battle could have been so good if it didn't fall flat on its face. Size and scope mean nothing when you have mechanics and gameplay that is uninteresting, boring, repetitive, and story importance and intimidation that quickly fades away once you realize how little of a threat it poses once you do fight it. So overall, a disappointing fight at its highest, and a boring, repetitive fight at its lowest. Not the worst fight I've ever faced, but certainly not something I'd go back and actively want to fight. I have been the Monarch of Dragons, and, well, I guess this old volcano was all out of fire to burn.